In the mid-2010s, Brian Thrift was probably the most consistent angler in professional bass fishing. He logged over 65 consecutive limits in tournament competition, which is just unbelievable. And from what I gathered, his strategy focused mainly on graphing for isolated pieces of cover during practice, and then targeting them during competition using his mapping and 360 imaging. At times, we would run 50 to 100 isolated targets in a day, and the strategy would work on pretty much all different lake types across the country and in all seasons of the year. And in recent years, younger anglers are building on this strategy by integrating forward-facing sonar to target isolated pieces of cover and reading fish behavior with the forward-facing sonar to become extremely consistent. One of these anglers is Tyler Williams on the Bassmaster Elite series. His main tool is a jig, and in this video I'm going to show you how you can identify these tiny pieces of isolated cover on traditional electronics, then target them with both mapping and forward-facing sonar to catch a lot of fish in areas that most anglers are overlooking. Let's get into it.
That looks really good. I think we're going to catch something right there. Go, here we go. Look at them all. Big smallmouth too. Beautiful fish there on that fishing on an offshore jig. That's a big smallmouth. Got a good one. Here we go. Nice fish here on the jig. Just had to tie on the jig and go to town. That's actually a big smallie. I was not expecting to catch a smallie doing this. Good fish too. So I'm talking about right there, guys, using the Tyler Williams approach to put some nice fish in the boat. That is a beautiful smallmouth bass on the jig. My goodness, fish of the moment offshore jig right here, guys. Nice and simple. Got the active target 2 in the water here, as well as my mapping. And as you can see, I have a bunch of, or maybe you can see, I got a bunch of waypoints here. And my cameras have been overheating like crazy today. So I took about 25-30 minutes to just graph, and I graphed up a bunch of isolated pieces of cover, and I'll regraph this and show you what the spot is here in a second. Actually, I'll just show you that right now, and then I'll get back up here and keep fishing. Okay, so let me show you what I graphed here on traditional sonar that made me stop in this area. Basically, I'm trying to find isolated targets to fish with a jig using forward-facing sonar. It's a really popular technique for the past few years, especially with guys in the Bassmaster Opens. It's been a really dominant technique. And not everyone's using a jig. Some guys are using jig head minnows and shaky heads, drop shots, all kinds of stuff. I like the jig though, kind of like Tyler Williams, just because it's a fun way to catch them, my favorite bait in the whole world. And what I'm looking for are basically targets like this that are maybe isolated rock piles and brush piles. Now this area right here is almost actually a little bit too covered up in brush, and I actually don't like this area as much. Even though there's a nice drop off here, there's so much brush and rock there that it's likely that other anglers are going to find that and potentially fish it. So instead of trying to look specifically for areas with a lot of cover, a lot of brush, I want to find more isolated pieces of cover. So the spot right over here, one of these over here, I can't remember, is where I just caught that last fish. And what I'm trying to find, again, are little small irregularities. So a flatter stretch without a lot of cover and then an isolated piece of cover. That's kind of the holy grail that we're looking for. So let's take a look and just regraph over these to show you what they look like. Again, I was graphing these while my cameras were overheating. It has been a pretty hot day out here today, guys, and fishing's been a little bit tough. As I mentioned, on the main lake kind of community holes, the fish have been really tough to catch. I've really not been able to get that many bites, and the ones I have gotten have been pretty small. So I'm pretty excited that I pulled up and got bit quickly doing this. So here's a few of these isolated pieces of cover I'm talking about. A random laydown, a random stick up, another random laydown, a small little rock pile right there. These small isolated pieces of cover, that's what I'm trying to focus on. Even like this little rock right here. Here's a little deal. I might mark this. I kind of missed that earlier. It's a little foundation or cinder block or something. So all of these little pieces of cover, that's what I'm trying to target. And you can see I graph with my side scan, my mapping, as well as my 2D sonar. And ideally I want to be staying in a general depth range that I feel comfortable in. Usually I'm in like that 20 foot of water depth range, because I can scan all the way up to like 10 foot and all the way out to 30, 35 feet. And you can see there's all these little tiny stick-ups that we're seeing, and this is the type of stuff I'm marking. These little tiny stick-ups you can barely see, and when I do end up fishing them with the forward-facing sonar, they look barely visible a lot of times. And there are really good rocky stretches in here, so we have a really nice rock pile right in here, which looks good. And that could be a spot, again, that can hold some fish, so I'm not going to completely count it out, but instead of maybe targeting the really obvious rocky spot over here, I might be looking more over here at the less obvious, smaller pieces of rock, though that rock pile, again, can hold some fish. So that's kind of what I'm looking at, and as we kind of get up here, you'll see that there are a lot of these small little irregularities, and I'm just going to mark as many of them as I can as I work through here until I have enough marked. I'm not going to mark every single thing, like every piece of rock and stuff that's really obvious like that. I want to find those smaller isolated targets, and I also have some of these targets marked on Google Earth that I've transferred over to my fish finder. So we'll just graph a couple more of these. You can see, again, a few isolated stick-ups. They're barely visible, but you can see on the side scan, this is why I like these, they're out away from other stuff. You don't have stuff all over the screen. You just have 1, 2, 3 pieces of cover with not much around it. That's really what I'm looking for this pattern, and we'll kind of get into more about how to fish these spots and what to do on this stuff, but that's kind of the gist of the pattern. It relies, if you want to do like the Tyler Williams approach, it relies heavily on forward-facing sonar to read the fish behavior. I might not get into that as much in this video because that's not my favorite thing to do, but I want to show you at least the types of targets these guys are fishing so you can get an idea of that. And again, I also have some isolated like rock and different things that I've marked just from Google Earth, and so we might be able to fish some of that stuff as well to have some success. But let's get back on the trolling motor and see if we can catch another fish in this area.
Finding bass offshore with a fish finder can be a frustrating process, especially if you don't have the right settings on your fish finder. You could graph over a great school of fish, but with the wrong settings, you could completely miss it. That's why I created sonar settings guides and put them on my website, fishthemoment.com. These are the settings I've used on all the different fish finders I've had on my boat over the years. They're specifically tuned to find bass, and I give detailed step-by-step instructions on how to change every single setting you need to get the clearest possible image, so you don't waste time on the water with bad settings. Definitely check out my sonar settings guides at fishthemoment.com.
Now that I've shown you what I graphed out here, let's take a look at a few more of these isolated pieces of cover. A lot of them are really tricky to see actually on the active target because they're very old, like pieces of brush, small rocks, things like that. So we got something here at 40 feet, and it's really tough to see right now on the active target too. It's there, it's just not super obvious. And so what I'm gonna do is just get my jig down in and around that area. My jig is about 40 feet right now, and I'm going to basically just hop that bait. Now you can see that piece of brush coming into view better. Just an old piece of brush. Really hard to see both on the side scan and on active target 2. But basically just hop that jig through the brush. There's actually a fish following it right now. There's a lot of little fish around these brush piles and around these pieces of cover, isolated rocks and stuff. And not all of them are catchable just because they're too small. But a lot of times what I'm going for here is a quantity over quality situation. I just want to get my bait in front of as many fish as I can. And that's why I'm using this 3/4 ounce football jig here. It gets through down to the cover really quickly, and I can basically just make a lot of repeated casts. It's basically like offshore flipping. I'm really just casting to isolated targets, but instead of being able to see them on the bank, I'm doing it out here in the middle of the lake. And it really helps if you graph these up first, because you can then look at your mapping like I have here, and I know exactly where these objects are versus having to just kind of randomly guess where everything is. And as you saw, I marked pretty much every tiny piece of cover, every little rock and stick I can think of. And a lot of the objects that we're looking at, they don't even hardly show up on the active target because they're so small, and it takes me a second to kind of figure out what's down there. I know there's something in the area, like that's what I'm looking for right there. Just a little tiny cinder block, it looks like, or maybe it's like the end from like a marina or something, an old like boat tie-up or dock tie-up. I don't really know exactly what it is. There's obviously some bait and stuff around it. Now, I don't know if there's fish on all these things, but I can drop that jig down there at 60 foot. I can hop that bait up, and if a fish is in there with this jig, they're pretty much going to eat it right away. You're not going to have to mess with them that much, and that's why I like to use this jig. If you do see that there's fish in that area and you didn't get one to bite, sometimes I'll make multiple casts, especially if you see a fish all around your bait, and hopefully I can show you that here again in a minute, but there's a bunch of fish in and around this thing. Just kind of swam up to it. I don't know what they're all doing. Let me see if I can get one to bite. Got a good one. This rocky spot up here. How big is this fish? It feels really good. Oh my gosh. Could be a smallie, I don't really know. Off of a Google Earth waypoint here. That's a big smallie again. My goodness, they are all over these rock piles. That's a big smallmouth too. My goodness, look at that thing. Beautiful fish there on that Fish the Moment offshore jig. That's a big smallmouth right here. Oh my gosh. Right on that isolated rock pile. These fish are definitely on the rock piles more so than the brush, that's for sure, especially these smallmouth. I need to weigh that guy. That's a good one. 2 pounds, 10 ounces. That's a good smallmouth right there, especially for beaver. Beautiful fish. Let's get that guy back down there. Beauty, man. That was awesome. There we go, got that smallie again on the 3/4 ounce football jig. We're actually casting at a little rocky spot that I marked on Google Earth doing some map study. And because beaver is 7 feet high right now, this little rock pile is deeper than it normally is. So when that lake is like 5 feet low, I can see it. And then now that it's like 8 feet high, it's in a good depth of water. And honestly, I wasn't looking at the active target at all for that. I saw the rock pile up there obviously, but I could also just cast right at my waypoint. And I think with the last couple of fish, I probably didn't need the active target at all, despite this video. The pretense, I guess, is the Tyler Williams pattern. The idea with what Tyler Williams is doing with active target, forward-facing sonar, things like that, is using a jig rather than the minnow to target these fish they're setting up around isolated pieces of cover. And this little rock pile here is a great example of that. You also can do it around brush piles, around standing timber, really any piece of cover, shallow boat docks, all kinds of stuff. And the way that a lot of these guys are using this jig, and Tyler isn't the only one who's doing this, is that they're trying to gauge, ooh, that fish was following my bait all the way back to the boat and as I was reeling it in. They're trying to gauge the behavior of the fish using the jig, just like they would with the minnow. And a lot of times these fish will eat the jig off the bottom, even though you're watching them in the forward facing. So you're not trying to basically like work the jig in front of them like a minnow. Instead, you're trying to just figure out where your jig is in relation to these fish, and then hop the bait up, let it fall, drag it across the bottom, figure out what mood the fish are in. And those last couple of fish definitely wanted that bait while I was dragging it. And because they want it dragging on the bottom, I honestly don't think I need the forward-facing sonar to catch these fish, especially because both of them came off of a little rock pile. I think all I really need to be doing is running these rock pile icons that I marked in my map study and probably just pulling up and throwing at a waypoint. So we might just start doing that. There are a few fish kind of on my bait right now, about 25 feet out. You can see them swimming down to my bait and kind of around it. I think after I catch a fish off a spot like this, it's less likely they're gonna bite again. But we have a couple of, you know, isolated rock piles around here. There's a little bit of brush up here as well. So, I mean, I can keep them honest on all this stuff, but especially because we're catching these smallmouth, and smallmouth love the rock, I honestly think I should probably just be looking for more of those rock piles. So we might graph a few more of those up here. So I fished through all of my waypoints that I made in this pocket here. So I moved to the next pocket over, and I'm basically gonna try to replicate what we just found. I have a few pieces of isolated rock that I've marked on Google Earth. Obviously, because I'm using Google Earth and I'm kind of relying on the drawn down satellite images, I'm not gonna find every rock pile in this area. So there may be more through here. So we're just gonna kind of take a look and graph, kind of starting up here again in that like 20 foot of water zone. And the reason I'm kind of focused on that depth again, it's just kind of a good depth for finding all these isolated pieces of cover, but also we have bait fish in that depth zone right now. So a lot of the bait is in 20 foot, which is kind of cluing me in that that's the depth we need to be in. That 15 to 20 foot is kind of a great depth right now for what we're trying to do at least. So let's make our way back up into that depth zone here. And I like this bank here because it's very flat. It sticks out far off the bank, but it's not, again, a super obvious area where you expect to see a ton of fishing pressure because it doesn't have like an obvious ledge or a drop off close by. So most likely we're not going to have too much fishing pressure here. And right off the bat, we have a nice rock pile that just popped up right on the right side of our side scan. So we're going to just start marking here. That rock pile is a little bit deep, 25 foot, but we're not going to be too picky right now. I do like the fact that there is rock in this area though, already popping up, because that means that there's a high likelihood there's going to be a lot of rock piles through here. We can see again my one rock pile icon that I made, but a lot of times when you find one kind of isolated rocky spot on Google Earth, there's going to be a lot more. Even if you find it up in like 8-10 foot of water or 5 foot of water or whatever it is with your lake drawn down, there's probably more of those areas further off the bank. So you can reliably find these rocky spots a lot of times, and there's some that are just popping. It's really hard to see on the right side of the side scan. That might be a little bit too deep, I don't know, but we're going to save that over there. There's a little rocky spot over here. It's again, it's kind of hard to see, but it's right in there. So we'll look at that. We're going to just mark all this stuff. And again, basically what I was doing earlier is I was getting on the trolling motor and I was just hitting all of these spots as quickly as I can. And you can do this with, again, forward-facing sonar. You can do it without. I have a video explaining how to line up on offshore structure spots and hit them first cast every time. I'll leave a link to that video down in the description of this video. I'll link it up right here too. And it explains how I go about setting up my mapping and all those things to fish without forward-facing sonar on these targets. But again, you can do a little bit of both. Looks like there is some rock right here, and there's actually a fish that just popped up on 2D as well. There's another fish over here. There actually is right in here. There's a fish. I'm not saying that that is exactly what we're gonna be fishing for, but I like the fact there's some good rock in here. Again, a little bit of isolated rock right there, right on our rocky waypoint. I don't have to even drop a waypoint there. That looks really good. I think we're gonna catch something right there. And honestly, it'll be cool if every single rocky spot we have marked we catch a fish on, because that will help. I could just run around the rest of the lake and just start hitting those spots and potentially be catching them, which would be really, really nice. And we're gonna kind of keep working through here. I didn't see a ton more kind of through this area. There's a little bit of rock, a little bit shallower up here, right in this area, so we'll mark that. It looks like there's quite a bit of potential through this area though. I'm not seeing as much brush around here. We do obviously see I have some brush and stuff marked from Google Earth, so we'll see what that's all about. But it's not so covered up with stuff that it's gonna make the fish kind of spread out. If anything, I think these isolated pieces like this are going to congregate these fish even more. That's a great rocky spot right there. That one looks really good. Kind of sets up similar to the last one we just fished too, so that could be a really good one. I think there's an old house foundation or something back in here too, or a pond levee or something. I don't know. I think I remember seeing that. There's a little bit of brush, isolated brush right in here. It's right on that brush icon. I'm not gonna mark it just to save waypoints. The only waypoints I actually keep anymore, guys, are my Google Earth waypoints. What I'll do every single month, because I have so many waypoints I throw on my graph, I delete all my waypoints and then I just add in my Google Earth waypoints. A little bit of brush, maybe some fish or something scattered about. I want to see what this rock looks like over here, and I want to graph down this other side too, just see if we can see anything interesting. I don't know if there's going to be rock on this other shoreline. I didn't see any on Google Earth, so there's nothing marked there, but kind of want to check it out. There's some nice like isolated like rock right there. I don't know what that's all about. We'll take a look at that, and then we're going to look at these little rocky spots, see if we see anything. It's very interesting. Yeah, it's like a little pond levee or something right here. Interesting. Ooh, there's a stack of fish around it. I don't know if those are all, some of those could be bass. Right on that rock right there. Good depth zone for it too. I mean, I have that marked with rocks, so we don't have to mark it, but that looks pretty good. I don't think those are all bass, but there may be some bass mixed in. It's kind of hard to tell. Those arches look a little bit small and kind of fuzzy, so those might be walleye or something else too. But let's keep graphing here for a minute more. And if I don't find anything down the stretch, then they'll probably just cut to me fishing all these spots. So we're about to make it up here to one of the really good looking rock piles here, and I want to show you how I'd line up with the traditional waypoint method. I just have a front graph here with mapping that's linked to my back graph with a network cable so the waypoints transfer, and all I'm going to do is just line up my arrow. I have a 0.1 heading sensor connected on my boat, so the arrow is always pointed directly in front of the boat. I have a range ring and a heading arrow set. If you guys want information about how to do that, I do have videos. I'll link it right here. And I'm just gonna fire that bait out there and then spot lock. And that bait should be landing right in the middle of those rocks up there. And this is how I would target this spot without the forward-facing sonar. That last fish I caught, I basically did exactly this. I had the forward-facing sonar on, but I was not really using it. I was just casting at my waypoint. And I just kind of am in the habit of doing that because this is how I fish for years. So this is a technique, again, that you can do with the traditional waypoint method, but you can also use forward-facing sonar. Both work. This is definitely a lot less efficient, this method, just because you're not going to be able to see exactly where everything is, where all the fish are, but day in, day out, it'll still get the job done. I feel like there's some grass or something down there off this spot too. Kind of interesting. Might have to throw a little bit of a different bait other than this jig. There's a bunch of grass up there, but either way, oh, it was a big gar. I was about to say one just came up on the surface right here. But wanted to just show you how I'd line up on the spot. Hit, oh my gosh, one smashed it right there. Come on, he hit again. Look at him, oh my gosh, on the active target. Okay, wait, I gotta switch it back. They're all over it on the active target. How do I get this back over here? Again, lined up on these fish. Okay, here we go. Lined up on these fish with traditional method. But there's like, one had it in his mouth and I just shook him off. Got him, there we go. Look at them all. These are all little guys, but there was so many of them. Oh my gosh. I don't know if y'all saw that. Let me see if I can show you on the active target. They're all following it back. There's so many of them right there. I got hit like 4 times because they're just these little spotted bass. One had in his mouth when I went back. Oh my gosh, that is chaos. But good fish right there. Again, lined up and got those first few bites without the active target, and I just turned it on. So you can see it can be done. And this pattern's working great, guys. That was really funny. That was kind of a cluster, but anyways, I pulled all those fish now right back to the boat, which is a bummer. They're all out here still. Oh my gosh, my heart rate spiked right there. I pulled like 15 of them back to the boat, 20 of them, and they're just following that jig back. See if any more are just kind of cruising around out here. But that was pretty cool. And again, all these fish are right on top of my waypoints I marked on Google Earth, so that's pretty helpful right now because I can just run these waypoints, and it seems like I'm gonna get bit. Got him. Another one right here. Good fish too. Nice smallmouth. Oh, this is a mean mouth. That thing is sweet. That thing choked it. There's a bunch of them off this rocky spot. Again, I just line up and throw at them, or you can use the active target, whatever you want. There's so many of them down there. That's a good fish too. Nice one. I don't know, he's got some grass or something sticking out of him, but that is a beautiful fish on that 3/4 ounce jig. Who needs the minnow or anything like that? Just get a jig on. Man, that's awesome. Any 3/4 ounce jig will work. I'm just throwing a Strike King Menace Grub as the trailer because we got really clear water out here. It's like 5-6 foot of visibility right here. So I like that Menace Grub from Strike King as my trailer. But I mean, you can throw a bunch of different trailers. There's a lot of knockoffs of all these different trailers, but a 3/4 ounce jig, some type of trailer, you're good to go. I'm not really all that picky about my jig selection day in, day out. The only thing, I do like a cable guard on my jig. That's what my Fish Moment offshore jig has, and that cable guard will help that jig come through brush a little bit better. But right now, I mean, it doesn't matter. You could just use whatever football jig. A 3/4 ounce one is good because it gets down there a little bit quicker. You can see it falling at 40 foot, and it gets down there faster, which allows me to be a little bit more efficient. And also when I hop it and pop it, it falls faster, which I think in this warmer water can trigger these fish a little bit. When it's a little bit colder, I'll sometimes go to a 1/2 ounce jig, just because those fish are a little more lethargic when I'm doing the strategy. Oh gosh, one had it right there. They're all around this deal. This is wild. Bunch of fish out here. Oh my goodness. I pulled my shorts down on me. And to kind of get back on topic with the theme of this video, the Tyler Williams method, a lot of the guys who are really good at using the jig with forward-facing sonar are guys that can differentiate the fish that are in and around cover and also on the bottom really well. A lot of times you'll see these little isolated dots that are super close to the bottom, and those fish can be tricky to see if you're not really looking for them. And you just have to look for dots that have movement across the bottom. Sometimes you'll basically just be looking at rocks, but sometimes you're looking at actual fish. And right in this area in here, there's like grass and stuff up there. There's like gar swimming around. There's all kinds of craziness. I don't know exactly what's happening up on top of that deal, but again, trying to just get that jig in and around the area where these fish are and then see how they're reacting. You want to hop your jig, pop it, let it fall, maybe drag it a little bit. Sometimes you just give it like one quick reel and then stop it. And then sometimes you can actually swim it back in the middle of the water column, and that will get these fish to bite. And you're just trying to read these fish, look for fish that are setting up tighter to the bottom and around isolated pieces of cover. Let me see if I can find a fish that's kind of in and around the bottom for you, just to show you what that looks like. There were a bunch of them on the screen obviously earlier. I pulled them all to the boat. So once you also catch a fish or two off these spots, they will get pulled straight to the boat. So like there's a fish swimming around close to the bottom at like basically right underneath the trolling motor right now. Oh, there's one. It's like at 30 feet. So you could see one right there, 10, 15 feet out. It's swimming right against the bottom. It's obviously they move, so you have to kind of try to keep him in the beam of the transducer, but he's swimming out again at like 10 foot. They're just kind of fish that are roaming around on the bottom, and those are a lot of fish that guys are targeting, getting good at targeting, because there's one out there at like 60 you can see, and not all these are bass. So that's why a lot of times you'll find that like that right there is most likely a gar, because it's just a really big return. It could be a carp, something along those lines, and you can see it very obviously. That's not what I'm looking for. And that's why I also like to find these rocky spots, because fish that are around isolated pieces of rock are a lot more likely to be bass as opposed to other species. That's not like a hard, fast rule, because there's obviously times when you'll find other species around rock, catfish, and all kinds of craziness. But overall, if you can find fish around some type of target, especially if you have a lot of rough fish in your lake, like Grand Lake in Oklahoma is a great example. Grand Lake, there's a lot of rough fish in that lake. And as a result, the fish that float or are very visible on the active target are a lot of times just not bass. And so instead, I'll use this approach a lot, finding isolated pieces of rock, isolated pieces of brush. A lot of times that is what's going to hold the bass, and you can basically only focus on the dots that are around those isolated targets you graph on side scan, instead of trying to target every little floating fish or blob that you see on the screen. So let's get over here. There's one more or a couple more rocky spots. Let's see if we can get another fish in the boat. Okay, last rocky spot right here. You see it out there about 60 feet away from the boat. Actually need to slow down a little bit. We're getting a little bit too close on it here. Let that jig fall down there. We'll try to drag that jig again, because it seemed like these fish like that jig when it's on the bottom. Even those fish that were kind of following it when I was hopping it and trying to make it go quicker, they just were not into that. They want it on the bottom today. That's kind of the deal. Don't know why these fish prefer that some day, and then some days they prefer when you're really erratic with the jig. It's interesting. You can see that when I'm hopping it and stuff, they are following it. They aren't, I guess, like opposed to me hopping it, but they're not also eating it either. So kind of interesting right there. There's a little bit of brush down with this rock too, which is interesting. I'm not seeing a ton of activity though. I think this might be a little bit deep. And honestly, that's another thing to kind of pay attention to, guys, is the depth of your spots. So like right now, the last couple spots have been in like that 15 to 20 range. This is out here in 30. So ideally, we would need to be looking for spots that are a little bit shallower than this one if we don't get bit here. I've worked right through the heart of that brush pile and did not get bit, which is not a great sign. So if we're trying to run this pattern, we want to find rock piles in that 15-foot. I mean, I have several more marked around the lake here. I could keep running this pattern. I don't think I'm going to just keep going and going and going and beating a dead horse on this deal. Probably about time to get back home for dinner, but not here for a bit. It's actually been a grind today because, again, I was fishing a bunch of the community hole stuff, and it was really not good today. And just in the last like hour and a half, caught several nice fish and just kind of got away from the beaten path. Still fishing stuff that's pretty easy to find if you use Google Earth. I'll link a video of how I find stuff on Google Earth Pro. Also, there's actually a version on the iPad and the iPhone now where you can mark those waypoints and transfer them over. So that's pretty cool. And I'll send that, or I'll link that video somewhere around here so you can see that. And yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. I was able to catch a few nice fish here at the end of the day and kind of salvage my day, to be honest. It was pretty rough here on the lower end of Beaver Lake. It kind of always is. The water's so clear here, and a lot of times I think these fish just feed at night. But hopefully this pattern will give you an idea if you are in a situation like this in a deep, clear Highland-style reservoir. You can run this pattern and maybe get a few extra fish in the boat. And honestly, guys, if I wanted to catch bigger fish today, I probably would have gone up the river in the dirtier water. I've had a lot of success there this year, but I've filmed a lot of videos there already, so I don't want to keep filming in the exact same spots, and that's kind of why I am going here to the clear end and struggling a little bit for you, but hopefully the video is helpful. If you guys want to check out any of the equipment I'm using in this video, especially this Denali Covert worm and jig rod, 7-foot heavy power, is a great jig rod at a great price, especially with my 30% discount code, denalifishing.com. So definitely check that out. And other than that, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. See y'all next one.